We will delve now in an important concept of artificial intelligence, which is the question, can machine be intelligent? And we will see that there is a test from many years ago called the Turing test. We already talked about Alan Turing that will assess if a machine could be intelligent or not, with some limitation. So let's see the overview of this lesson. We will introduce Alan Turing. We will deep dive into the Turing test. We will see how it's made and which are the limitations of the Turing test. And we will ask the question, is the Turing test still relevant for modern artificial intelligence systems, and if there are alternatives to it? Let's move to who was Alan Turing. We already saw him in the previous lecture. Alan Turing was a British mathematician that started working on the idea of computer, and its pseudo-definition of AI was systems that act like humans. Why pseudo-definition of AI? Because, as we said, that at the times of Alan Turing in 1950, there was no actual definition of AI. The word artificial intelligence was not yet invented. So in 1950, Alan Turing wrote a paper called Computing Machinery and Intelligence, focused on the concept of if a machine can be intelligent. And he asked the question for the first time, what is intelligence, at least for a machine? If you want to know more about the history of Alan Turing, I suggest you to watch this movie, The Imitation Game, that tells a quite nice story about Alan Turing, also at personal level. But let's move on the Turing test. What is it and how it works? The test involved a game with 3 participants, 2 humans and 1 machine, 1 computer. The human evaluator, the judge, poses open-ended questions to both the human and the computer, try to understand who is the human and who is the computer. If the judge, if the evaluator is not able to differentiate between the human and the computer, following Alan Turing, it means that the computer exhibits some intelligence. This is schematics. We have an evaluator behind a blind screen that posing question to the human and the computer. Which are the advantages of the Turing test? The brilliance of the Turing test lies in its envisioning of a machine ability to process information, to understand natural language, and to engage in human-like communication, without actually requiring to understand what is knowledge, self-awareness, that machines should be infallible. And Turing himself predicted that it would take until the turn of the century, actually this century, for a machine to pass the test. Was he right? We will see. But of course, there are some limitations of the Turing test. Indeed, we can understand easily that Turing test is not a measure of true intelligence, but is a measure of imitation. Actually, we are measuring the ability of the computer of mimic human responses. And this doesn't reflect necessarily true intelligence, for example, like emotional intelligence or really computational intelligence. And we see that actually humans can even fail the Turing test, for example, in computation. Of course, machines should be intelligent to show that it is not able to perform computation so fast, because human will take some time, but complex mathematical operation can be failed by humans and machine can win. And this is one of the main limitations of the Turing test. But I think the biggest limitation of the Turing test is that it depends on the judge. It depends on the knowledge and the intellectual ability of the judge to discern between several topics, and based on its tendency to misclassify human and machine due to an expected distinct superiority. I mean, the humans, more intelligent human, maybe they are more willing to approve machines as humans, while less intelligent human with less knowledge, they are propense to understand that the computer response is too much elaborated. But let's see, is there any machine that actually passed the Turing test? And the answer is yes, there are machines that recently have passed the Turing test. Actually, the first example is in 2014, when the chatbot called Eugen Kutzman claimed to pass the Turing test for the first time. This chatbot was developed by Ukrainian developers, was impersonating a 13-year-old teenager, and he fooled the judge mostly for his ability to misspell English. And this fact of giving the computer the ability to go wrong actually mislead the judge, and many of them consider this chatbot not a chatbot, actually, they consider him as a human. What happened in 2018? Google Duplex AI fooled 33% of the judges during his Turing test. And in that exploit, Google CEO made an appointment to the hairdressers using the AI system. And of course, the critics here was that, of course, the scope of the conversation was very limited and was not a full Turing test. But still, the AI model was able to really fool many of the judges, and even to take a reservation for the AI addresses. In 2022, Google Lambda passed again the Turing test, even giving the impression of being sentient. And the Google engineer that made this claim actually was fired, because it's clear that there is no sentient component in an AI machine. So it was a bit bold statement, but indeed, in 2023, we have actually two systems and some more happening now, like ChatGPT, a Google Bard that passed the Turing test. But here we ask the question, is the Turing test still relevant for modern AI system? And the question also is, are there alternative tests than the Turing test? There are many possibilities. One of it is the total Turing test. And the total Turing test actually tries to demonstrate that the machine has several human-like cognitive capabilities. For example, sensory perception, motor skills, problem solving, creativity, and many of these that are typical factor of human intelligence. Nevertheless, there are main objections. And the main one is the scope here is unrealistic. It's too much for a machine. You may remember the differentiation between weak AI, which is operational, which is what we need, and strong AI, which is this total understanding of human-like intelligence in all the aspects of what makes human peculiar. But of course, there is the other problem. There is measurability. How can we measure? There is no consensus in the dimension of intelligence. How can we measure emotional intelligence? How can we measure motor skill intelligence? So this total Turing test is something that is philosophically very interesting, but practically impossible to achieve. Another alternative test that has been proposed very recently is the modern Turing test. The modern Turing test was proposed by Mustafa Suleyman, the co-founder of DeepMind, and the test is based on entrepreneurship. Actually, the test would ask the machine to turn $100,000 in seed money into $1 million by creating a business plan, especially creating an e-commerce business plan, find manufacturer, listing all the items. And actually, this test will allow evaluator to measure the machine ability to set goal, to create a plan, and to actually to execute the plan. The machine should exhibit advanced strategy skills and reasoning skills that are typical for human, and there is no better field to apply these skills than the entrepreneurship field. To recap what we learned today. So we understand that in 1915, the computer scientist Alan Turing developed a test to measure the intelligence of computing machine. In reality, this test is not a measure of truly intelligence, but is a measure of human imitation. Then we have a need, based in the modern AI system, to expand the Turing test. And there is the need to review this test to measure intelligence. There are still many options open, and there is not yet consensus on which is the best test to assess the intelligence of machine.